So I really appreciated how much of the worship this morning was so focused on God's holiness, because that's what I saw in this week's Torah portion. And so that was just a little God thing. I'm sure it was probably planned, but this week's Torah portion is Yitro, or Jethro. And so that's how it starts off. And I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can, because there's a lot to talk about in 8 minutes. So here we go. So it starts off in chapter 18 of Exodus, right? And Jethro hears about how the Israelites have been taken out of Egypt, and he hears about kind of what God's been doing. So he sends a message to Moses, and he's like, "Hi, we're going to come see you. I'm going to bring your wife and your sons, and we're going to come." And Moses is like, "Cool." So they get together, and they catch up, they reconnect. Moses fills Jethro in on all that God did, and from that, my study Bible says that what kind of priest Jethro was is kind of ambiguous up to this point. We don't really know, but based on Moses' testimony, he responds with, "Well, now I see that Yahweh is greater than all of the other gods, because this is what he's done for you," and they worship together. And then the next day, Jethro sees how the people have been coming to Moses and giving him all of their problems. Just all day long, this is all Moses does. And Jethro's reaction to that is really interesting, how much he condemns it, almost. He's like, "This is not good. Like, you cannot sustain this. This is, like, you are going to wear yourself out. You're not going to be able to maintain this. You need to find people you trust, who are trustworthy and God-fearing, to come alongside you and carry this with you so that you can endure and so the people around you can be satisfied." And I just think that that's such a great picture of why we're in community, why we're brought together, is so that we stop trying to carry it all alone. So if that's you, if you need that today, stop trying to carry it all yourself. Because we were put in community so that together we could do things that would be impossible to do alone, because we serve an impossible God. So there's a little minute for you. But then, moving forward in the Torah portion, we really just see how awesome God is. The display at Mount Sinai where he comes down. And I want to read that real quick from Exodus 19:17 through 19. Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God. They stood near the base of the mountain. Mount Sinai was enveloped in smoke because Adonai descended onto it in fire. Its smoke went up like the smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain shook violently. As the sound of the shofar grew louder and louder, Moshe spoke, and God answered him with a voice. So that is just kind of mind-blowing. I know the Women's Bible Study has been talking about this a lot, just how crazy that would have been to experience that, especially after everything that happened in Egypt. And that's the voice in which he gives the 10 Commandments, right? In some versions, it actually says that he speaks through the thunder. So that's how we hear the 10 Commandments. That's how we hear also God saying, "I curse the father's sins to the 3rd and 4th generation, but I show compassion to the 1,000th generation." And just, if you hear that in thunder, it kind of gives you a little bit of a different perspective on how serious God is when he says that. I don't know, maybe that's just me. But I think looking at the prophet section of this Torah portion as well in Isaiah, that it just, it pounds it in kind of a little heavier. So I'm going to read that as well. It's Isaiah 6, and I'm going to read 1 through 5, starting at verse 1. In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw Adonai sitting on a high, lofty throne. The hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphim stood over him, each with 6 wings, 2 for covering his face, 2 for covering his feet, and 2 for flying. They were crying out to each other, "More holy than the holiest holies," or in some translations it says, "Holy, holy, holy," just 3 times, is Adonai Zavaot. The whole earth is filled with his glory. The doorposts shook at the sound of their shouting, and the house was filled with smoke. Then I said, "Woe is me! I too am doomed, because I, a man with unclean lips, living among a people with unclean lips, have seen with my own eyes the King, Adonai Zavaot." And so I think probably a lot of us in this room know this, but I want to emphasize it because it's important. in the Hebrew, when a word is repeated, it gives it the intensified meaning. So, like in the New Testament, when Jesus says, verily, verily, or truly, truly, it's like absolute truth. Shalom, shalom would be absolute peace. But interestingly enough, this is only one of 3 places in the Old Testament where a word is repeated 3 times. And I believe the only other time that it's repeated 3 times in relation to God is in Revelation, when the seraphim are proclaiming this again. So I think that just really emphasizes how important the holiness of God is. And to speak more on that, I actually brought one of my favorite books with me from one of the best modern theologians I know, Jackie Hill Perry. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with any of her writings or anything that she's presented, but I want to just read a real quick excerpt of this. Treating God like he's ordinary might be a natural response when we're ignorant to who God has revealed himself to be. Even with Moses, if he wasn't told not to come near, he would have. He had to be instructed on how to approach God, to not come too close, to remove his shoes and respect the sanctified ground underfoot. The same with Israel, who was warned not to touch the mountain God descended on, lest they be put to death following the irreverent approach. Devoid of awe, we reach behind the veil too quick to even notice the disrespect. We enter the Holy of Holies and treat the mercy seat like a footstool. The Lord's Prayer begins in such a way that if one decided to let it sit on the mind for a bit, one might choose not to say anything at all. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Around him, the seraphim refused to look. Before him, Isaiah confessed. Seeing him, Isaiah fell on his face. So, just the power of God and the realization that we have done nothing, are nothing to deserve being the image bearers of somebody like that. The end of Isaiah 6, the portion that I want to read, is where the seraphim comes and he gives Isaiah the hope to be able to speak to be in the presence of such a mighty king. He offers him a touch of purification with one of the coals from the altar, right? He touched my mouth with it and said, here, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is gone. Your sin is atoned for. Then I heard the voice of Adonai saying, whom should I send? Who will go for us? And I answered, I'm here, send me. And then later on in Isaiah, it gives us the hope, the forward glimpse of why we as modern Christians, as Christians post Jesus, have the opportunity to be close to the throne of God, to enter before him and to speak with him directly. It's Isaiah 9:4 or 9:5. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. Dominion will rest on his shoulders, and he will be given the name Wonder of a Counselor, Mighty God, Father of Eternity, Prince of Peace. So, I'm going to leave you guys with that. Shabbat Shalom.